Oh, it's going to work then.
Yeah, I didn't realize it gave you that second option because I couldn't see the screen before now.
Okay. Now, I want to undo stop share, right? So I can start
Yes,
broadcast.
it's going live to YouTube right now. And if I go to your channel, I should see it. So I'll keep an eye to see if anyone has comments.
Mm-hmm.
See the screen before now.
Okay, very good. Okay. Well, all right. So now, no, I've got to turn that sound off. I want to undo.
Yeah,
I've got to turn
you're
that
live right now.
I've got to turn off that sound. That's really important. I can't click on stopping the sound.
Meta, if you click on the YouTube mute button, it will mute it on that window.
It didn't, but I turned the gradient scale thing off. Okay, we're ready to start. Okay, now you get off, and I want to go back to Steve Staples. How do I do? I don't know how to keep you from being the main feature of attention. Your screen, your image is the only thing I can see, not me, not
If you
Steve.
click speaker view, or if you click speaker view at the top right corner and then click Steve's image, it should put it on Steve.
No. No, it doesn't.
Steve, if you talk, does it switch to your window? Could you try saying something?
Sure. Here I am. This is Steve.
All right. Now let's see if it switches to me. Adam, can you see me?
I have mine on gallery view, so I see all three people at the same time.
Me too.
All right. I'm going to assume that that I'm on, that it's doing what it normally does. And it is 12:45, and we are going to go live. And I'm sorry for all of this. So here we go. Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today I get to talk to an old friend, Stephen Staples.
Hi, Meta.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm terrific.
That's
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, Steve, I should say who you are. First time I ever heard of you, you had just founded something called the Rideau Institute, and you ran this thing, and you have this publication or outreach device called Ceasefire, and it was just terrific. So you ran that for what, about 10 years, Steve? Was that about right?
Well, Rideau Institute was founded in 2006, and I was its founding president, a position I held for 8 years.
Okay, it seemed very impressive. I remember you did wonderful things. Like, I remember a story where there was a press conference at Parliament, and some minister or somebody came out in the hall and gave this big briefing, and they left the mic on. So as soon as he left, you ran over and commandeered the microphone and gave your own little speech to the world, which I thought was terrific.
Chutzpah goes a long way in Ottawa.
I remember thinking that, you actually became kind of the spokesman for the whole peace movement in Ottawa because you had an office and you looked real and you can look convincing. So it was wonderful.
That was never my intention, and I would never pretend to speak for anybody other than myself or my own organization. But during that time period, that was a hot time. You remember 2006 was an important year. We founded the Rideau Institute then, but also it was Stephen Harper's first government. It was a minority government in 2006. And in Afghanistan, where Canadian troops were stationed, we moved from a largely peacekeeping role in Kabul to a war-fighting standing with Operation Enduring Freedom, and we moved to Kandahar. So it was a really important time for the peace movement and for Canada. Yeah.
Actually, I don't associate you with Stephen Harper at all. Isn't that funny? These are two different compartments in my mind. Anyway, it's good to have you back here in Toronto, where you have changed hats or something, because you no longer run the Rideau Institute. I guess you still have some affiliation with it, but the important thing that you're doing now is something called Peace Quest, right?
That's right.
And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Because I think of all the people, all the guys organizing things in Canada, you have the biggest flair for being able to make something interesting and splashy and colorful and something people want to participate in. So I hope to learn a little bit from you. You're really a master at this.
I don't know if that's true. I'd say maybe second only to this podcast, Meta.
Well, we'll see. There's a future for this, maybe. And you're going to make it into a big event because we need to know more about Peace Quest, and this is the time to talk about it. Peace Quest was at Kingston, Ontario. Give us a history of who started it and how come you inherited a thing of that kind, which I don't think you were even connected with at first, were you?
Well, I've been friends with the Peace Quest folks for many years. So you're quite right. Peace Quest was launched by an amazing group of people as a community initiative in Kingston. And really, it was the idea came in about 2012, around the centenary of the War of 1812. And you remember that we still had the Harper government at that time. And people were concerned that they were going to use the centenary as a way of kind of rewriting history and glorifying war. And they knew that 2 years later, in 2014, would be the centenary of World War I, which would be even bigger than the War of 1812. So, sorry, I guess it's not centenary, it's the bicentenary of
Yes.
it was 200 years for the War of 1812 and 100 years for the anniversary of World War I. Anyway, the point being is that people wanted to say, we want to take a role in this, and we want to say, no, we don't want this just to be a glorification of war, particularly the First World War, which was terrible waste of life, for very no gain at all, warring families in Europe, all the wrong reasons, terrible experience for millions of people who were affected and were killed. So Peace Quest came about as a way to kind of counter that narrative. And it was based in Kingston, as I mentioned. There was other entities set up in Peace Quest Cape Breton, there was Peace Quest in Saskatchewan and Saskatoon, and there was a few others. And it was it had four themes. One was interfaith work, policy, the arts, and peace education. So those were the four main themes. And it ran its course, did amazing work, published books, did concerts, sponsored youth work, just did an amazing amount of work between the period of 2014 and 2018, which was the centenary of World War I. At the end, they said, well, we're kind of done. That was a great campaign, but, we built this wonderful thing, and maybe we could have somebody who would want to take it to the next stage. Now, I had been involved, and I participated in their events, and I had been collaborating with them. And so through a very good community-based process, I was asked to become the chairperson of sort of a new version of Peace Quest in it. Slightly different, built on the foundations, paying tribute to its history, but it's a little bit different now, and it's called Peace Quest Leadership and Education Initiative. And it still has strong roots in Kingston, strong roots in the peace education world, but it's different configuration, and we're taking the work a little more broadly and exploring new areas. So I'm really excited about it.
Well, yes, because I always thought of Peace Quest as kind of a local initiative. In other words, everything it did was in Kingston. It didn't aspire to be an international movement or anything of that kind, or even a Canada-wide one, as far as I know. It was a group of people in a local community who did amazing work. And I actually didn't know very many of them. I think I know Jamie Swift a little, but how many other people should I've known from that group? Are there other people that?
There was an amazing group, Sister Pauline Lally. It was a co-founder with Jamie Swift. Michael Cook was also involved. He was actually one of the original founders of Project Plowshares. There was a lot of people from the education community, Judy Wyatt, Ann Bonifero, Bronick, and many other people who were involved in the arts community, in the peace community, and the education. So Peace Quest has a very strong education role in it, which, Meta, as you know, I did 20 years of hard labor in Ottawa, doing big policy battles, and then I was before that I was an organizer for 10 years on the West Coast in Vancouver, where we would face off against nuclear submarines
What was your
Washington
organization
State.
out there? Because that was before we were acquainted. I knew
That's
your
right.
name, but I don't even remember what group you were running in
Well,
Vancouver.
back in the 90s, it was a peace group based in Vancouver called End the Arms Race.
Oh, so that was, okay. Well, that was the main outfit in Vancouver. I didn't realize.
It was a coalition of labor organizations and community organizations, and I had some wonderful mentors, and I was being trained. I was a much younger guy, and it was a great experience. And then toward the end of the 90s, I was an organizer for Maud Barlow and the Council of Canadians, and I opened up the Council of Canadians' first office outside of Ottawa, and it was based in Vancouver, where I was an organizer for the council and set up chapters around the province, and was part of the Canadian contingent that went to the big Battle of Seattle in the World Trade Organization in 1999.
Does it End the Arms Race still exist as such?
No.
Okay. But Peace Quest does. So let's go back to Peace Quest.
Well, I think it's an exciting time, actually, Meta, because some groups, as I mentioned, in the arms race, I think it kind of dissolved in the early 2000s. I think it was probably about time. But as you see, organizations have lifespans, and they have life cycles. Movements have life cycles too. I mean, they may not disappear, but they wax and wane as conditions change. I'm old enough now to have seen the movement go, as we all are, that we could probably say we could see different times through the motion of it. And actually, that's one of the things that I'm very interested in now that I'm in my 50s. I'm a little bit of an older guy. How movements transcend from one generation to the next. It's very important. And the peace movement right now is going through a real moment in terms of older leadership being transferred to younger people, and new peace groups are being set up now, which is really exciting. And I'm interested in education and working with young people to get their organizations started, just like people helped me back in the 90s and in the 2000s.
Wonderful. Well, okay. So how are you going to go about that? I understand you have a regular job at York University.
I'm actually a graduate student at York, and I do research there as well. And so I do a little bit of work. I also work with other organizations in terms of fundraising and things like that, and do Peace Quest. So I'm a pretty busy guy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Well, tell me what your degree is in, what you're working toward as a graduate student.
I'm doing a Master's of Leadership and Community Engagement at the Faculty of Graduate Studies, but it's kind of rooted in.
I'd be teaching that course, man.
It's awesome. It's awesome, Meta. I am not the oldest person in the class. I'm second oldest at 54.
No, that's not my point of view. It's your experience. Because I bet you whoever's teaching that course, you could run circles around that person. I don't know who that is, but I apologize if I've offended you, but your own background is quite stellar.
Well, I've had a great opportunity to do a lot of things, but it's important though to have the theory, as you know, being an academic yourself. The theory is important, and for people like activist folks like me and many others, there's not many opportunities to do the book learning side of things. It's really an entire profession of trial by error.
Oh, come on. I'm not sure that I can remember anything from my academic career that is particularly helpful for me now doing the work that I do. So if you can say that you're really learning something that's useful, please put me back in touch with my roots, because that's where I've been. And I don't remember it with any great sense that, I can refer to that as a source of guidance. Do you think you're learning something that's useful?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. In fact, sometimes I've been sitting there thinking, as we're going through one of the lectures, or I'm doing some of the readings around policy development and things like that, or different campaigns, and I go, oh, that's why when I tried doing that thing that time, it didn't work. And it's like, had I read this, maybe I would have done things a little bit differently.
Uh-huh.
So there's a great benefit to it, but also there's other benefits too, Meta. I'm learning with a wonderful cohort of 30 other millennials, early career professionals, many of whom are involved in other social movements or in education. And the insight and things that I'm learning from the next generation of activists coming up that's just as useful to me as anything I'm reading in those textbooks.
Oh, well, that's really good to know. That's very encouraging.
Yeah,
I'd like
it's
to
an
meet
amazing
those
group.
folks. Maybe I can sneak in and sit in the back row someday. And no, I bet you aren't even holding the classes, are you? You're probably doing it all by Zoom.
It's all on Zoom. Yes.
Mhm.
So, which is
Well,
quite interesting because also learning the pedagogy of doing digital education is
mhm.
fascinating as well.
You actually, a few months ago, I know you offered free lessons on how to Zoom, and you had quite a following. I attended one of them. I still have things I need to learn about Zoom, but but at any rate, you gave a great course sort of for anybody who wanted to learn how to use it.
Well, I did, and in part, it's I was lying in bed one morning with the silence of COVID all around us. It must have been late March. And I was thinking, what are we going to do? What does all this mean for our work? How are things changing? And what contribution can I possibly do in this situation when we're all in lockdown? And so I came to realize, I said, this is, as activists, as a community of activists, we're going to need to figure out a whole new way of engaging with our supporters, of talking amongst ourselves. Our essential work for peace is going to have to continue no matter what. And so I knew that we were going to have to learn a new language. We were going to have to learn a new language of digital communication in order to keep the movement going, because movements must adapt to the different circumstances. And I thought, this is just another moment of adaptation. And I think that I can probably teach people how to do this in order to keep the movement going. And I taught over 700 people through 25 workshops.
Oh, that was a lot more than I knew of. Oh, good. Well, you know what? I think in some ways it's really a blessing. It is not just a useful way to make up for the fact that we don't get to do the things that we're used to. In a lot of ways, it's better. The thing that I have a much more transnational orientation. I think of Canadian activists by and large as rather parochial. Canadians only can think as far as the boundaries of Canada go, and don't really think very much in terms of being a world leader and taking on a movement or a challenge that has to be global in scope. So, but I don't think very Canadianly. And I do have a lot of friends in other countries and I want to talk to them. So the blessing of Zoom is it doesn't matter. I mean, you could be in South Africa, you could be in Siberia, you could be in the middle of Australia and just participate in a conversation as we're doing right now, as well as if we were right here in town as you are. So that I think is going to nudge us into thinking beyond borders. And I don't see why we haven't already, but now there's no excuse to just be limited in our perspective to a Canadian only. In fact, we don't even have Canadian only. As you know, I just asked you whether In the Arms Race still exists. It was a major Vancouver or West Coast movement. And the fact that I had to ask whether it still exists is another indication of the fact that even this various parts of Canada are not in touch with each other as much as we ought to be. So, I don't know that many people in BC, and I don't know them well. Of course, I wouldn't have met them mostly, but I think it's, we can meet now and we should. And this has It does definitely mean that we can go past some of the limitations that we've normally had because we had meetings in person, and some people miss that a lot. Doug Roach wrote an article for Peace Magazine lamenting Zoom. And as if poor Zoom is to blame. I mean, the point is, he said he likes to hug people and he can't hug people on Zoom. Well, yeah, that's a limitation, but everything else is pretty good. I think it works reasonably well, don't you think?
I think for anything, there's advantages and disadvantages, and it's still way too early to be able to say definitively, in the final word of whether this is good or bad. I can certainly think of some good examples. For instance, when I'm also part of a group, Toronto-based group called Hiroshima Nagasaki Day Coalition, which does an event every year down at Nathan Phillips Square on Hiroshima Day on August 6th, commemorating the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Well, this year they had to move everything online because that's just the way it was. It was COVID. But suddenly we realized that, wow, this audience that we used to just have of a few hundred people in Nathan Phillips Square, the potential is much greater now by putting it online. So the reach of that event suddenly became part of an international discussion, which I think was really exciting, However, there is a downside too. Many of those people that I trained on Zoom involved not just donors and activists, but also organizers, people in organizations. And about 8 weeks ago, I did a post survey, so it would have been the late summer, saying, what's your experience been? Has it been positive or negative? Do you feel that your community engagement has been impacted at all? By and large, most individuals felt quite positive about it. They felt that things were okay and they still felt connected. Most organizations also felt positive, but there was a definitive, greater sense of uncertainty about how effective it was. So the effectiveness of it has yet to be determined, I think.
Compared to what, though? I would wonder how to judge effectiveness anyway. I mean, as a former professor, I remember, planting a hell of a lot of seeds in my life. Many thousands of students I was planting seeds in. And once they were out of the course, I never saw them again. So you never have the feeling of confidence that what you were doing really had any impact or any lasting effect. That's true for education in general, I think. But for Peace Magazine, which I have been editing for 38 years or something like that, nobody dislikes it. Nobody complains about it. How much good is it doing? I don't know. I think you, anyway, have to sort of just do it out of faith that you're doing the best you know what to do. You think that it'll make a difference. You have faith that maybe somehow you are making a difference. And of course, if you get any negative feedback, you take that into account. But I don't have any idea how I would know whether even this, what we're going to do today or doing today, is that going to do anybody any good in the world? I don't know, but let's do it anyway. It's fun.
Well, I tell you, I'm totally with you there. I'm not one to rule out tactics. Doing a video is a tactic, and I've been involved in enough policy debates to know that sometimes when we engage with trying to address an issue and move it in a certain way, we have our own idea of how that's going to unfold. How is that story going to play out, right? And so many times, though, it doesn't work that way. And you arrive at your endpoint, you achieve your win, but it's from a completely different direction. And you kind of go, oh, I think we've won. Have we won? I mean, that's one of the things campaigning is.
Are we there yet, Daddy?
Because things happen all the time in unexpected ways, and we can't predict it. So sometimes you just got to start different initiatives. But you're asking really good questions, and this is one of the things that I'm particularly interested in. I don't like to leave things totally to chance. I need to know that when I have such limited resources, and when you're in Ottawa, when I was running the Rideau Institute, I had so limited resources. I didn't have time to do things wrong. I really felt like I didn't have the latitude to make mistakes. I had to really get it right. So in order to be effective. So I needed to do my best educated guess in using data, using analysis, and mixed with some intuition as well, but get a sense of what is going to work. And so now we're talking about how do we create the next generation of activists? Well, how does that happen? And this brings us full circle back to what I was mentioning earlier. How do social movements transcend from one generation to the next? Because all of the big social movements have had to do it, whether it's slavery or women's rights or all of these things. And
I don't believe in
what is the
any of
way?
it. I have a completely different take on how, and the issue, I've never been in an organization that didn't have at some point, and often every day, conversation about how do we get young people into our movement. As if without young people coming in, that's the end of the story. No. Young people, if they're going to do anything, they'll do it on their own. They want to do their own. That's being young means trying to get away from mommy and daddy and do something independently. So movements like, the climate change movements that are youth-led are really youth-led. And bless their hearts, go for it, kids. Terrific. If we can support you, we will, but it's yours. That's great. Let them do it. They are not interested in joining an organization full of old people. However, that doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. How do we get our replenishment of members? From other old people, or other people rather who are about to become old. The best time to recruit somebody to the peace movement was they turn 65, because then they're about to retire and they're going to have lots of free time, and they have lots of smarts and lots of background and lots of information still in their heads, and some of them can still run around the block. So that's the time you want to get somebody into your movement. And that's where I get all of the people who work with me. Everybody on the editorial committee of Peace Magazine has gray hair. That's because that's when they're ready to enter the peace movement again. Young people will join for maybe look around for a year or so, but they're going to go on and do something different. And then when they get to be 65, then they'll come back, or they'll come off to a different kind of organization. So I think this thing about having to say we have to pass it to the next generation or it'll die, that's nonsense. We just get the next batch of old people. There's always a funnel of old people coming through. So, so hang in there. In a few years, Steve, you're going to be ready for me to recruit you.
I look forward to that day.
Tell me, let's go back to talking a little bit about Peace Quest before we end, because I want to hear your aspirations. What are you going to do with this outfit now that you own it?
Well, I don't own it. We have a board. One of the things that we've done is it was really kind of had a campaign structure originally. I had a 4-year lifespan, a certain very specific goal. That's really a campaign as opposed to an organization, I would say. And so now we've kind of gone back. We've registered it. We have a board. We're trying to put it together in sort of more firm footing, building on the basis that was there. Going forward, it's still very new, but I think certainly I'm interested in education aspect and seeing where peace education fits. As I look at the peace movement right now in Canada and even internationally, one thing, I don't want to create another organization or be part of another organization that's just duplicating things that other people are doing and probably doing better than I would. So what are the areas, where are the gaps right now in the peace movement? And when I talk to people, when I ask their advice, education does seem to be one of the areas where we do not have a strong presence, whether it be working with teachers, whether it be going into schools, if we talk K to 12, or even in some cases doing mentorship and early career coaching for young professionals. At the Rideau Institute, we did have a fairly robust internship program, and that's continued on. And we have interns all over Ottawa, in organizations all over Canada, even after just a fairly short time of less than 10 years. But I'm interested in K to 12 because I actually am a teacher, and I was trained as a teacher. And so I'm interested in looking at what we can do in terms of focusing on that peace education. There's also going to be some policy work. I also see adult education as part of that, and advocacy and organizing. So there'll be those elements as well. But I think those are the two areas. Will be certainly some kind of campaigning and organizing, but also I want peace education to be an important part of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. What about post-secondary education?
Absolutely. So that's a bit of a different kettle of fish, but I think there's certainly opportunities for experiential education, for people involved in looking for early career work. My view, Meta, maybe is a little bit different than yours. I mean, certainly, the over 65 crowd is essentially important. Everybody's important. But my view is to really bring in the next generation. Jobs are key. We need to find people jobs in the peace movement. We need to teach them how to fish, not just give them fish. And I know that was important for me. And we all kind of draw from our own experience, but I had a job and I learned on the job. And I became it became a profession, not a volunteer, not a hobby. If you look at other movements like the environmental movement, there are thousands of people who go out and earn a paycheck every day trying to protect the environment. Well, we need a lot more people earning a paycheck every day trying to work for peace.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My grievance is that, I ran a peace and conflict program at the University of Toronto. I founded it and I ran it for about 15 years before I retired. And then, of course, they retired the program because there wasn't anybody. And that was okay with me because I knew that if they kept it going, they would get somebody who really didn't know anything about it. And it wouldn't be a very good program. So I'd rather have it die. But nevertheless, my point is I kept on teaching afterwards for several years. I kept giving a free course that on nuclear issues, nuclear power, and mostly nuclear weapons. And Adam, whose photo is on the screen at the moment, is one of my students. Adam is now working for me, Adam Wynn. And he's our technician at the moment. But the point was that I felt it was very distressing that there wasn't a single course at the University of Toronto on nuclear weapons. I'm not sure what you could take on nuclear power, but I think probably in engineering and places like that, you could take courses. But as it stands now, the university doesn't offer courses on nuclear weapons. Never has, and as far as I can tell, never intends to, which is really, really sad because, that's something that a student should even be able to major in, much less, just get one course in. So, I think that maybe one of the things that we could do by way of fostering real peace education is to lobby universities and even community colleges and other institutions of post-secondary education to give courses on nuclear weapons and the nuclear threat. I don't know how to do that, but if you know of any way, let's talk about it. Steve? What
Well,
do
I
you
know there actually are quite a few peace and conflict programs in Canada. They are not really, working in the peace movement myself for many years, I never felt very connected to those groups, and was kind of surprised actually to learn that there were so many out there. So I think that's certainly an area you want to look at. You mentioned post-secondary education, whether it can be linked up with social movement. I do know there's some work being done at the University of Cape Breton on nuclear weapons. So you find pockets of these things.
Okay.
But
Yeah, that's really quite rare.
maybe Zoom has provided us an opportunity to reach out and find these courses and what they say, amplify them. We can amplify them now using the technology. That's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's terrific. I'm just delighted that you're doing this, Steve. And we ought to have a conversation like this once a month to find out what you're doing and what everybody else is doing. Because we both have our fingers to the pulse of various peace groups in Canada. And I wish you all good luck and good wishes for the success of Peace Quest. And we'll stay in touch. All right?
Thanks, Meta. I look forward to seeing more of your Save the World programs. You're doing great education work. You're a real inspiration.
Thanks so much, Steve. Take care.